As the use of bronze spread across Asia, civilization dawned in the east. Over the course of the coming centuries, a small valley along the Yellow River would be catapulted into preeminence and founded a civilization to endure for millennia. Having developed and practiced agriculture independently for millennia, the history of China opens with a myth, telling of a great flood that devastated the local Huaxia population. Sometime in the late 3rd millennium BC, there was a large and long-lasting deluge which ravaged much of Chongshan, or the Central Plains, during the reign of the mythical Emperor Zhao. Hundreds of thousands of people were forced to abandon their homes and relocate to higher grounds, while the flood continued to roar. Eager to solve the problem once and for all, Yao appointed Gan to control the floods. Gan was a conscientious official, yet he lacked the adequate knowledge of dealing with the torrents. He built large systems of dikes along the flooded river in hopes that the flood would be stopped, yet they persisted and only grew more devastating. After 9 years of unsuccessful attempts to contain the flood, Gan was dismissed and his son Yu was put in charge of the work his father failed to complete. Instead of constructing dams to halt the flood, Yu carefully studied the reason behind the frequent floods of the Yellow River basin. He then devised a different plan, building massive canals that would divert the floodwater into fields, as well as dredging the riverbed to relieve it of any potential barrier to the river flow. Yu is said to have spent more than a decade combating the flood, before finally succeeding. He accordingly became known as Dayu, or Yu the Great. Emperor Shun was also greatly impressed by his work, and gave the right to royal succession to Yu. When Yu became the new sovereign in 2070 BC, he moved to Anyi and named his dominion Xia, starting the first legendary dynasty in Chinese history. When Yu the Great died after 15 years of reign, he passed the throne to his son instead of following the old tradition of Shangrang, or abdication in favor of a non-heir, hence initiating the practice of primogeniture in royal succession. In reality, Yu may never have existed at all, although it is with little doubt that somewhere between the 21st and 19th century BC, a collective political entity of primitive communities in the Central Plains began to form, and would later develop into an embryonic unified Chinese state. It is from here a complex society centered on agriculture began to form along the banks of the Yellow River in the early 2nd millennium BC. The Xia Dynasty, as traditional chronicles recorded, lasted for roughly 5 centuries. By 1600 BC, the Xia Dynasty was overthrown by one of its fief, the Kingdom of Shang, which was led by a gifted leader named Tang. This marked the establishment of the 2nd dynasty, the Shang Dynasty, in traditional Chinese historiography. The Shang Dynasty, unlike its legendary predecessor, documented its own existence in the form of bronze inscriptions. These inscriptions imply a more complex political system marked by the establishment of more structured state institutions. On the national level, there were the 2 main bodies of the state, the Qing Shi Lao, which was the administrative body, and the Tai Shi Lao, which was the body responsible for all forms of sacrifices, rituals, and festivals. On the local level, the system of Fengtian, a political system involving hereditary social classes and feudal responsibilities and obligations, began to take its early form. In remote areas where direct control couldn't be easily enforced, the central government at Yin would assign a Fangbao, or a local noble, to govern the estate. A Fangbao hence became a de facto feudal lord and usually exerted a high degree of autonomy. As time passed, the Fangbao often grew too powerful and became a threat to the Shang court. As a consequence, most Fangbao were effectively eliminated under the rule of King Wu Ding. This primitive feudal system would also have profound impacts on the political systems of the later Zhou Dynasty. The overthrow of the Xia Dynasty saw the first king of Shang, Tang, declare himself the recipient of the mandate of heaven, hence establishing the divine rights of kings. The word Tianzi, or Son of Heaven, which was later used as a title for all Chinese emperors, traced back to the Shang Dynasty. The combination of royal and spiritual authority, along with the concept of the mandate of heaven, would later incorporate elements from Confucianism, legalism, and even Taoism to become the leading political ideology in not only China, but throughout East Asia. The concept of a divine heaven has to do with the widely present pantheism of the Shang dynasty. Nevertheless, out of all the divine beings the Shang people worshipped, they particularly revered Di, or emperor, who was thought to be the king of all gods, a concept somewhat comparable to the Greek Zeus or Roman Jupiter. Sacrifices and divinations were parts of everyday life, for divine oracles were required for virtually any occasion. Much like other ancient mythologies, the people were heavily reliant on divine wisdom to make both mundane and important decisions. This spiritual order was supplemented by the manufacture of bronze, which reached its pinnacle under the Shang dynasty, whose impressive sets of ritual bronzes represented a complex political, social, and spiritual civilization. The complexity of these bronze vessels demonstrates the existence of an increasingly stratified society, as more and more vessels were used for political and religious purposes, instead of solely as containers. Emerging alongside with these ritual bronzes was the system of li, or rites and etiquettes. Which bronze vessels people used depended largely on class and function. Even for the simple functions of storing food, there could be dozens, if not hundreds of vessels that distinguish between the proper uses for each group and occasion. It is evident that the life of the Shang people already expanded far beyond the immediate need of food and shelter. The Shang dynasty endured for another 5 centuries, but was finally toppled by one of its fiefs. In 1046 BC, the last king of Shang, King Di Xing, commonly known as King Zhou of Shang, was overthrown by Yi Fa, later King Wu of Zhou, who proclaimed himself to have the mandate of heaven bestowed upon him. Like Shang, the kingdom of Zhou was also originally a fiefdom of its suzerain, but became influential and powerful enough to dictate the ownership of the throne. The reign of Zhou is divided into 2 phases: the period when royal authority was closely respected and the country was unified, known as Western Zhou, named so after the location of its capital, and the period when central authority gradually collapsed and local powers gained independence, known as Eastern Zhou. During Western Zhou, the political system of Shang was further transformed to suit the increased complications of government. There were also many revolutionary inventions during this period. On the basis of the existing hereditary system, a new system called Zhongfa was established. The Zhongfa system was by and large a system of primogeniture with certain modifications. Under this system, every Fangbao passed his seat to his eldest legal son, while all other sons were assigned the title of Qingdafu, or minister. Every Qingdafu would further pass along his position to his eldest legitimate son, while assigning other sons a lower title. While the seat of a sovereign is reserved for his eldest legal son, the fiefdom is often divided amongst all sons. Therefore, a direct result of the Zhongfa system was the breaking down of large fiefs into smaller ones, which effectively restricted the nobles' ability to expand militarily and stabilize the society as a whole. Another important invention of Western Zhou was the Jifu system, which was in essence a duty system based on geographical distances. The closer a fief was to the court, the greater its obligation to the royalty, as demonstrated mainly in the form of tribute. Throughout Western Zhou, the Fengjian system was continuously enforced, although this changed when King Yu, the last king of Western Zhou, died in the Battle of Mount Li in 771 BC. The ensuing crisis quickly escalated into the collapse of the Zhou court in the west and a prolonged civil war between 2 claimants to the throne. With the fall of Western Zhou, the traditional 3 dynasties came to an end. What followed was one of the most politically chaotic yet culturally significant eras in Chinese history, the Spring and Autumn period.